Hey, what's up everybody? Ralph here. So today's topic, I want to share with you 4 steps on ways for you to get through a recession. Now, a lot of people have different, definitions of what a recession is. Some say it's two consecutive quarters of negative GDP, and also another indicator is usually when there's a lot of layoffs happening. Regardless of whatever that definition is, whether we're in a recession or we're not, obviously a lot of people are hurting. Inflation is at 8.6%. So people are paying more today than they did, years ago. So I just want to share with you guys like a couple of steps because it is possible to get through a recession. And obviously if you're someone that has money, you're better equipped to weather the storm than compared to someone that doesn't have money. But there are ways for you if you're someone that has a lot of money, is still ways there for you to get through. Because let's be real, even though some people are not wealthy, they're still able to weather that storm. And there's a reason why they're able to do that. They're more equipped, they're prepared. They've done things to put themselves in position to make sure they're able to get through a recession or times where there's economic trouble. So I want to share with you 4 ways and 4 steps for you to be able to weather that storm as well, even if you're someone that doesn't make a ton of money, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to build up an emergency fund, right? Everybody heard of this before. We all know about it. Usually, some people say it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months of expenses. So, and that's usually a good range. Some people keep more, some people keep a little less, but usually a good range is 3 to 6 months. All right, and it's important to keep that emergency fund because obviously during times of recessions, there is so much uncertainty, right? People losing job, emergencies come up, and people that have this money set aside are able to make sure that if there's an emergency or if something comes up, like they need to fix their car, they're able to take some money out, right? They can take out the cash and then make that payment, right? So they don't have to put themselves where they're using credit or have to borrow money from somewhere, or they're put in a situation where they have to sacrifice something else in order, to fill that emergency. So you want to make sure you're putting money aside, or you have that emergency fund for any time where there's some situation that happens that unexpectedly, right? So it's important to have that money set aside because you don't want to be digging out and asking people for money or taking out credit where you don't have that money. You want to make sure you have something set aside. And I know that's the hard part when you're trying to set money aside when you don't make a lot of money, but whatever you can, try to set up, even if it's $25 a month, $100 a month, make sure you're working towards building up that emergency fund, right? Put as much as you can aside to make sure that you can build that up, as long as it takes. Because I know for a lot of people, they don't have enough money to build that emergency fund. But if you can, put whatever you can aside, and you want to make sure you're building up that emergency fund just for situations where unexpected occurrences happen, right? So number 2, spend less, right? And like I said, if you don't have enough money to put aside for that emergency fund, the next step you can do is spend less money, right? That will help you, when in times where there's trouble. So a lot of people times where people have the most trouble when it comes to managing money is not because they don't make enough money, it's because they spend too much money. They tend to spend more than they make. So one thing you can do, especially during recessions, is spend less money. You want to make sure you're cutting down costs. Like you want to make sure you're creating a budget. If you're someone that doesn't manage their money properly, create a budget. Write down all the expenses. Make sure you're tracking everything you spend, and then cut out the things that you don't necessarily need, right? There's so many things that people, if they just went through their statements, or if they just tracked everything they had and they looked through their account and said, okay, I spent this, boom, 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 they would figure out there are so many things they just don't need. And a lot of people don't track these things, and that's where a lot of people get in trouble because they're like, all right, I got a job, I can make sure I can make these payments, I can pay all these things down, and then at the end of the month they figure out, oh, well, I don't have any money. It's because you're not tracking where your spending is, all right? It's not enough to just be like, oh, I have an income coming in so I can spend whatever I want. You want to also make sure that you're not spending more than you make, right? If you're making $5,000 a month, you want to make sure you're spending less than that. So it's important to make sure if during times of recessions, you need to cut down costs, right? Now, I'm not saying you go bare bones. Like you just have to cut out things that you're just not going to need. Like maybe you can't go on that vacation, all right? Maybe you can't, instead of taking 4 vacations a year, you cut it down to like 1, right? Because you want to make sure you're making sure you're managing your money properly. You want to make sure you're keeping track of your money. You want to make sure that you're not overextending yourself, especially when if you're not someone that doesn't have an emergency fund, right? So you want to make sure you're putting money aside, and then you want to make sure you're tracking and spending less, right? So number 3, paying down credit card debt. We all know when it comes to credit card debt is the worst kind of debt. they have, you know, anywhere from 15 to 24% APR. You're paying 15 to 24% interest on the money that you owe. Imagine that if you invested, imagine you had money invested and you were getting anywhere from 15 to 24% on your money. That would be a great return. But instead of that coming to you, that's going out to somebody else. Especially during recessions, you need to make sure you're conserving your money, right? Instead of having that money go somewhere, you can be using that money to build up your emergency fund, or making sure that you're taking that money and buying things that you need in terms of like groceries, gas, things that you need in order to get through these things. So it's important to like pay that down. And I know for a lot of people that it takes time. Like people have probably a large debt, but if you got to knock as much debt as you can down now in order to prepare for a recession, because during recessions, when things come up, like I said, emergencies, it's going to be hard for you to cover these emergencies, cover these costs when you have to pay, when you have to, you know, use your money to pay down a credit card bill, right? And I mean, look, you could sacrifice paying your credit card bill, but we all know what's going to happen. It's going to mess up your credit, and that's going to damage. It's going to hurt you in terms of like future monies that you need, money that you want to pay, you know, get in the future, right? Whether you're buying a mortgage or you're buying a car. So you want to make sure you're paying down that credit card, because that's the worst form of debt. And we want to make sure that, and you'll notice that like a lot of people that are getting through this you know, in terms of recessions, they don't own a lot of debt outside their mortgage, maybe a car. They don't own a lot of consumer debt, right? So they're not as stressed, because when you're owning credit cards and you have all this debt, it's very stressful because you have to make sure they're paid. They don't care about your situation, right? They don't care about what you're going through. They don't care that you're sick. They don't care if you have people, you know, family members that are sick. They don't care that you're struggling financially. They want their money every month. They want you to make payments every month, and if you don't, obviously they're going to affect your credit. So they don't care. They want their money, and they want it on time. Right? So it makes it difficult to get through times where, you know, it's tough if you're owing money to someone else, right? So you want to make sure you're getting your money, or you want to make sure you're getting that credit card debt and trying to pay it down as quickly as possible, right? Say if you're someone that has, you know, a job and you have income coming in, make sure you cut those expenses down, cut out as much expense as you can, and then you want to attack that debt, right? That credit card debt has to go, because it's going to get tough when the recession hits and things get crazy and emergencies pop up and people get laid off. You want to make sure that you're well financially, because even if things happen to you, the emergency pops up, if you're not giving money to someone else, you're going to be able to get through it, hopefully, right? More than likely, you can be able to get through it. You can manage it. You're not going to be as stressed, right? So make sure to pay down that credit card debt. And the last one is make sure you want to secure stable employment, right? If you have a job that you don't think is secure, maybe it's the time now to try to find a job that's more stable, more secure. Okay. And if you're someone that has a job that's pretty secure, but you're like, you know what? Because a lot of people are looking for jobs that they can work remotely, right? And I've heard a lot of people talk about, like, if a job doesn't offer me remote, you know, working, they're not going to take that job, or they're just going to leave. Or like, say they're working at home and then their job says, all right, it's time to come back in the office. They're talking about, all right, I'm going to another job, or I'm going to leave. Now is not the time to do that. Right? If you're someone that doesn't have a secure job, maybe it's time to go find a job that's more secure. And if you're someone that has a secure job, then it's not time to be picky. You want to make sure you're staying in that job, make sure you have an income coming in, and you want to make sure you're saving up a lot of money and making sure you're secure just in case you know, things get crazy. Because you're going to see, like I said, during recessions, you're going to see a lot of layoffs. Layoffs are already happening now. You got Netflix, you got other companies that are laying, Redfin, real estate companies, they're laying people off. And that's because when they're looking at their profit margins and their revenue coming in, it's going down. So when they see that, they say, all right, we're going to get less profit. We got to make sure we're cutting expenses, because companies are cutting expenses as well. And one of the biggest expenses for any company, for any business, is labor, right? So that's what you typically see that tend to go. Like, you'll see people getting laid off from companies because they know, like, the biggest cost, the biggest expense for a lot of companies is labor. So when they see their revenue decreasing, they're going to have to make cuts somewhere else. And that's the thing. Companies are making these cuts, and you're going to have to do the same thing. They're going to spend less. That means you're going to have to spend less as well. So it affects everyone. It affects, you know, the individual, it affects the company. So you'll see a lot of people getting laid off. It's already happening now. You want to make sure that you're secured with your job, and make sure you get through the storm. So if you do all these things, you make sure you build up that emergency fund for any emergencies, right? You're spending less, you're paying down credit card, and you have a secure job, and you have income, stable income coming in. you'll be able to get through this. Because like I said, everyone's affected, right? Everyone's affected, whether you're rich, poor, whatever, everyone's being affected. It's just that some are impacted more, right? And you want to make sure that you put yourself in a position where you don't have to be impacted as much and that you can get through this. Because when things get really bad, you want to make sure you're good, your family's good, and then when you come out of it, then you know how to build yourself back up to make yourself even stronger, right? So those are my 4 steps, all right? You got any comments or questions below? Comments or questions, make sure you leave it down below. Hit the like button, and please do not forget to subscribe, right? So you guys take care, have a good one. Later.